Welcome to Talking Tech Journeys, hosted by me, Ben Whiteley of BPM Tech. We're delighted to bring you season 1 of Talking Tech Journeys. The aim is clear, to bring you some of the most engaging and respected figures within tech and transformation, providing a snapshot of their journeys to share knowledge, ideas and insights on all things tech and transformation. Sit back, relax and enjoy the journey. Welcome to Talking Tech Journey Season 1. I'm Ben Whiteley, delighted to be joined by Zara Thomas, Director of Transformation at Vita Health Group, a motivated and result-focused with a proven track record of delivering commercial opportunities whilst ensuring projects are delivered in line with scope, schedule, risk, outcome, prioritisation, value and benefit. It's a bit of a mouthful, that one, Zara, so looking forward to today, and yeah, thanks very much for joining.
Thank you, Ben. It's really an endorsement from me, and the amount of different things that I cover, it's surprising when you say it all out.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Looking forward to exploring further. So just in terms of a brief introduction, Zara, just from a high level, it'd be great just to understand a bit in terms of who you are, your background, and summary of your sort of health tech journey.
Cool. So, as I say, I'm Zara. I've worked in healthcare now for about 14 years. Prior to that, I've been in all different types of industries, from retail, pharmaceutical to hospitality, pub trade. So always kind of class myself as a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none, which is when I now realise that's where transformation is absolute art of what I do. Came into NHS 14 years ago, worked across various different project roles, and then touched on different IT technology roles, commercial roles, data roles, some operational roles in there as well, before finally kind of landing in that transformation space. And I've been with Vita now for just over a year.
Brilliant, thank you. So it'd be good just to explore the journey further, and let's take you back to the beginning, Zara. So how, why, when did you sort of first become interested in healthcare and, like you say, potentially technology as well?
So I think technology has always been of interest to me right from when I was a child. I remember getting my, for those of you old enough to remember, Commodore Amiga 500. Absolutely loved it. Had all the kind of games and the gear on that. Was always interested in how it worked, how it operated, and got into lots of different gaming. But I was at a time where it wasn't particularly cool for girls to be into gaming and stuff like that. I kind of always kept it a bit of an arm's length, and it was my nerdy hidden secret that I enjoyed doing. And then with the healthcare element of it, that came from when my dad became quite poorly. He had illness called MSA, which is like motor neuron disease. And I realised at the time I was working for a retail company, and it just felt it was all about the bottom line, and how much money was coming in and going out, and it just wasn't making me feel good about myself and the reasons for why I went to work. And as we all know, I spend a lot of time at work.
Absolutely,
and I really wanted to feel like I was making a difference. So I explored lots of different roles. I decided quite quickly that healthcare was probably where I wanted to put my focus into. Spent a lot of time exploring lots of different roles, everything from clinical through to administration type roles to operational, everything in between. Just quite quickly, I probably couldn't deal with patients on the front line, and absolutely admire anyone that can and do. I'm not sure if I could do the clinical side of things. So kind of found a role that was doing some project bits, and that I'd had experience doing projects before, so it seemed like a natural fit and an easy sideways step to make in my career. And I worked within the NHS in various different trusts, foundation trusts, for the best part of 3-4 years. And that was in, like I say, project roles. I was doing some data analyst type roles as well. In some process mapping, and really kind of getting a feel for particularly mental health at the time, secondary care mental health, but also across the MSK roles as well, and looking at other community health providers, and
Yeah.
what they're doing. So that was my journey in, and then moved over into the independent sector at that point, which was a difficult jump, because I really believed in the NHS, but what I saw in the early times was it's inefficient. It still is
Yeah.
inefficient
Yeah.
in a lot of areas, as I'm sure you know.
Mm.
And so it kind of always felt like the opposite problem of the reasons for why I moved into healthcare. It felt like there wasn't ability to make some meaningful change. The NHS is a big
Yeah.
beast,
Yeah. Sure.
um, and trying to make some impact of what I was doing and making it meaningful wasn't landing. And a role became available in an independent provider, community provider, which was local to
Hmm.
me. Much smaller company. I think at the time they had circa just over 100 staff, and it just
Okay.
seemed
Yep.
a good way that they all they did was NHS work at that point in time as well, and it just seemed like a really good opportunity to be able to have some real meaningful impact and have a voice that could be heard
Mm.
in a smaller company and make some really positive changes, whilst being a bit more of an arm's length NHS.
Yeah. So you've sort of touched on quite a few different roles within different sectors, organisation size, like say NHS. I mean, if we just sort of take you back to the beginning, you know, what was sort of the importance that sort of technology played to the various organisations when you were setting out?
So my first role in the NHS was, say, it was a project role, and it was around they were using a PAS system, so patient administration
Hmm.
system, and they
Yeah.
wanted
Yeah.
to do a EPR, electronic patient record, um, in mental health services. So my role was around how we did that. How do we take all
Mm.
these obvious processes and make them to be the biggest challenge in that project was the people. They were quite
Yeah.
happy with their paper notes. They felt safe and secure with their paper notes. They didn't trust the technology, and I say this going back nearly 15 years ago now. So
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
it was, not everybody had smartphones, for example. Not everybody was comfortable with technology. They'd never used, in some cases, people had never even used a computer to anything other than turning it on. And we had to
Mm.
do IT skills assessments for people. And I remember one quite fancy person, when we was training them, got the mouse and they just plonked it on the monitor. So that was the
Mm.
level that we was dealing with in trying to get technology. But getting people on that journey of how can computers take away the mundane tasks that you do. So we were saying, like, when you're doing it on paper, you're always having
Yeah.
to work out this and this. The computer's already done that for you. It's
Mm.
templated it, and having to try and think in the way that a clinician or an administrator does to help build the system in a way that is conducive for them, is a real skill and a real art, and it's making sure that you've got the right people around the room at the right time to input into that and listening to those voices.
Yeah. So in terms of, obviously, you left the NHS, as you touched on, went to sort of private healthcare providers. I mean, how did you sort of find that transition?
Um, it was interesting. It was difficult to start thinking in a different
Mm.
mindset, because I think a lot of people that have worked in the NHS for a period of time, and myself included, you can sometimes end up feeling institutionalized.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
I obviously did have the previous experience that I'd worked in the private sector, like say retail in particular, is a
Mm.
really cutthroat industry, and it was hard making that transition in the first place into the NHS, right? Because I was used to a CEO who had no qualms walking into a room and telling you exactly what for, and
Mm.
no uncertain terms. You go into the NHS and it's so much softer. Like
Yeah.
that just wouldn't happen. And it's because you're healthcare as well, right? We do at
Mm.
Vita do insights training. So we understand people's colours if you've not come across it before, but you have people that are red who are very kind of
Mm.
directly, briefly gone, and then you have people that are green, which are very caring people, and obviously a lot of clinical people are very caring.
That's, yeah, sure. Yeah.
So that was a real culture shift first, and then coming out of the NHS, there was almost this middle ground. It was between the two, because
Mm.
all of a sudden there is some incentive that and some drive from people that we need to be efficient,
Mm,
because although we're doing work for NHS, we are being held to account on a budget, which
mm,
never really got talked about when I was in the NHS of what we were doing. It was almost like it was free money.
yeah.
Nobody saw themselves as being accountable for that money that was flowing in or out of the organisation, whereas that did occur in the
Mm,
independent sector. But at the point where we also felt, because we were an arm length NHS, there was suddenly a lot more scrutiny in what you were doing because you didn't have the full NHS badge on. You had to ensure that we were, even more hotter than probably on our governance, and making sure that we
mm,
dotted all of our I's and crossed all of our T's
yeah.
in what we were delivering. So there was lots of differences and changes, but the biggest thing by far, and the reason why I still work in the independent
Mm,
healthcare sector, is the pace of change that you can make. Uh,
mhm.
in the areas that we are, there was things that we were talking about when I was working in the NHS, and they were like, "Oh, that's 3 years, 5 years down the line,"
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it felt like saying, "How can that be?" Like, I
Mm,
don't understand why something would take so long, but it's because there was so much bureaucracy
mm,
and in the processes that you had to follow and sign off. Whereas going into a company that was only kind of like 100, 150 people,
sure.
um, you could make changes on the spin of a hat and
Mm,
make amendment to a system to make people's lives easier. It was a really good space to be in,
mm.
and feeling that every day you were coming home and making a positive impact into the way that people were working.
Yeah, like say, you can't sort of replicate that ultimately, and I suppose that I know you've touched on the journey there. Obviously, you worked at Circle Health in a sort of couple of different remits, wearing a couple of different hats, from a sort of a technology lead, day-to-day management, delivery of IT service, but also sort of a commercial development role in terms of. Are you just able to sort of explain a bit further about the blend of the IT and commercial experience, and sort of how that's sort of come together and affected you as a person, and some of the decisions that you make well today?
Yeah, it's kind of adding extra strings to your violin, as it was, isn't
Mm.
it? Kind of making you a more rounded person and being able to understand things. Because if
Yeah.
you're looking at it purely through a IT technology lens, you're going, but of course this would be the best thing to build out because it will look like this and it will feel like this and it will be amazing because it'll have all the bells and whistles and we'll be able to make this, this, and this and throw some AI in. It'll be
Mm.
great and super. When you start to then go on the commercial side, you go, yes, that is great. However, no consumer is going to pay £100 a month for this product or whatever it is that you're building out. So you suddenly realise that you've got to work within the constraints of what the consumer is going to demand from you, in that perspective. And that might be a consumer as in an end user if you're doing a self-pay proposition.
Mm.
But also when I was working within Circle, there'd be your private medical insurers and what
Sure.
they required from pathway and what that would look like, and they'd potentially have some very set ideas in what that would look like when you were going out to tender and bids,
Mm.
because they want it to map into their pathways, which might mean that you've got a provider here and a provider over there that need to link and talk to one another, and you can't have it where the scope creeps either way, because then you'll be
Yeah.
leaning into one provider's or another's remit in what they were delivering. So it helped you consider from different angles what it was you were trying to build out, and actually it made it easier as well around the whole minimum viable product when you're building out from a commercial perspective,
Hmm. Yeah.
understand the
Yeah.
technology side, because you may want X, Y, and Z, but again, from my experience of not being purely technical and not being a
Mm.
techie, um, I could sometimes, I do struggle with this sometimes, but
Mm.
I can take a step back at times and go, hang on, guys, are we over engineering a problem, like a solution here?
Yeah.
Could we actually, for an MVP, could we just have an administrator or somebody that is just moving these cases from one system to another? It's not ideal, and again, in time, you'd want that to be it. But if it gets the product to market quicker,
Mm.
because that's the other string of the commercial bits, you're looking
Yeah.
at what everyone else is
Yeah.
doing in the market, and can you get to market first? Do you want to get to market first? That's not always the name of the game either, right? Because if you look at certain things in history,
Yeah,
um,
sure.
people that have got to market first aren't the ones that
Mm.
succeed. Apple, for example, they didn't come to
Yeah,
market
absolutely.
quite a
Yeah.
while afterwards, but they're the front runners now because they've learned by the other people's mistakes.
Yeah, and that's it. And like you've touched on, the NHS being a big beast, and very slow to obviously influence change, and the strategy 3, 5, 10 years of roadmap, and obviously like you say, potentially the more smaller, agile, but that is probably of benefit. But like you say, learning from other people's mistakes is often vital as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and there's got to be a happy medium somewhere,
Mm,
right? Because when I was at Circle and they'd won the first MSK integrated care contract, that was a really exciting space to be in, right? Because suddenly, for the first time ever, the NHS had contracted in such a way that put the hands around a whole MSK service,
yeah,
muscular.
yeah.
We had a fixed budget, so we had to be really innovative in our approach and our patient pathways and our alternatives to surgical interventions.
Mm,
It allowed us to be really innovative. It was at a time when the MSK health tech space was quite hot, so we was meeting lots of different people,
yeah.
doing lots of different things, which at the time, again, it's going back nearly 10 years ago now, augmented reality, for example,
Mm,
was not really something that we kind of knew or touched on. And we were
hmm.
seeing these people that had sensors you could put on your legs and they could move in particular ways to tell you if you was doing your exercise correctly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, and it was trying to balance is this somebody that's just come with a bit of a pie in the sky idea? Is it ever going to
Yeah,
work? Is it ever going to work at scale as well? Because that's
yeah.
how we're trying to view it: is could you push this out across hundreds, potentially thousands of patients in a very short period of time? Um, but then the flip side of that is using the ones that were more in ground, or if we look at certain systems that exist
Hmm.
in the healthcare market, um, they sprung up 20 plus years ago. They're now completely kind of become fractured in what they're doing because
Mm,
they can't be agile enough because they've become too big and they've kind of added different elements on over time. So then
hmm.
when startups come and they can do really cool stuff via various and build out APIs on the spin of a hat and be able to connect systems to one another,
Yeah.
they're great, but they don't necessarily have the I've completely forgot the word now. Um, they're
So,
not secure and they're not as stable. That's the word I was looking for.
mm,
They're not necessarily as stable as the people that are doing the startups, and their tech,
yeah,
like their change releases and things like that. They might be more sporadic, and you might find that they
yeah.
do a release and then they have to roll back the release if they're
Mm,
more agile, rather than somebody that's been in the industry for probably a lot longer and they've been doing it a lot longer, so they've got a good rhythm and cadence.
yeah.
Uh, and like I said, it's finding that happy medium and
Mm,
recognizing as a provider that if you're going to work with the cool startups,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
you have to lean into them a lot more and
yeah.
support them in their journey and what they're doing.
Mm,
You'd hope that the bigger ones that have been around for a
yeah,
while, a
yeah,
bit
yeah.
ability, you can just kind of let them do what they do because they've
Mm,
got a tried and trusted method in what they're delivering.
yeah. I think that's really important message, like you said, that mix and blend of being first to market, but is it viable and scalable in the short, medium, and long term? And like I said, just weighing everything up ultimately. So, I mean, obviously, you've sort of touched on. I know you've done a lot in terms of business, technology, business partner over time, and you've mentioned sort of innovation, continuous improvement, iterative change, etc. I mean, how do you sort of create and encourage that sort of innovation, continuous improvement across a business, a culture?
It is the culture piece, right? Like,
Mm,
and the CEO where I work at the moment, and I always get it the wrong way around, so apologies if I do. But, culture will eat strategy for breakfast is one of his
mm,
famous sayings of what he says, and is dead right. But you have got to harness that that culture, and we are the transformation team within Vita, but absolutely not the innovation team of Vita, because I think sometimes people can then go, oh, well, they're the people that come up with all the ideas. And it's like, no. Anybody in the company can have a great idea. So we launched last year on the back of our staff survey feedback, an ideas portal, and we actively go out and we encourage we go to different team events, different meetings, and we're constantly plugging, here's our ideas portal, guys. And it doesn't have to be just an idea of going, this is a cool new technology. It could be a problem they have as well, but they just don't know what the answer to it is. It just is something that feels harder than it should do. And someone in our team will go and look at it, and we've created the capacity within our team to be able to review those ideas on a monthly basis. And if they're quick wins, quick fixes, we'll see how we can and do things so that people in the business can get that feeling that they've been recognised, and we move forwards and go, somebody's done that for me, that's great, I'll now come up with another idea and push myself back in. And we incentivise it as well, as we do a gift voucher every quarter, just a nominal amount, kind of, again, just create a little bit of enthusiasm, a bit of encouragement. And then within my team, we have monthly updates, and we'll tend to try and bring something one of us is working on in a project to that table, and we'll just kind of almost spitball ideas at one another and try and it in a completely random way sometimes, because you can get too bogged into the details with stuff, and you just kind of can't see wood for the trees and go, there's no other way to do this. And then somebody will go, but how about we don't do it this way, we go from A to B, what if we went from B to X? And you just, oh gosh, yes, of course, that'd be brilliant. So for me, it's living and breathing it, and excited about it. And it sometimes can feel like a bit of a dirty word for people, but to enjoy your work and to be like having fun at work as well is something that's really important to me. And I've kind of been in cultures where that's not felt been to be okay, but in my group, that's what we try and do, is we try and bring a bit of fun to it, because actually that's sometimes where the best ideas. And you only have to look at like Google Space and Facebook Space, that's what they're all, isn't it, is having those cool
Absolutely.
you be able to think creatively.
And a collaborative, supportive environment, like you say, where every opinion matters and everybody's got a voice.
Absolutely. And fail safe as well, that's really important to us. And we done a senior away day earlier this year with the coal company, and we were gathering ideas of what people felt about Vita, and that was one of the things that came out time and time again, is that people felt that they could come up with these ideas, and they could if they failed, they could fail in a safe space. But we also try and embed that culture of, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail at the same time? Because that's really important. If you go in with that mindset of going, this is going to work, put in the right, particularly when it's in healthcare, you have to put the right governance parameters around that. But allowing people to have that ability to go after what they think is a winner is really important.
So a lot of engagement, and obviously across various stakeholders, so often with various interests and priorities. So from your perspective, obviously head of transformation now at Vita, how do you sort of get people on board? How do you sort of manage the interests and the sort of various interests and priorities from one stakeholder to the other?
So I think it's bringing people on the journey from the very beginning is super important, and having those conversations both in the room and out of the room of what it is that we're trying to deliver. But ultimately for us, we go through a process, as I'm sure most transformation teams do, is we bring an idea, a concept, it goes through a project group, it goes to a business case. Once the business case is signed off and we said, we're absolutely doing this, we've got the money to do it, we've got the resource to do it, we do a kick-off. So apologies, we bring everybody who's the key stakeholders, because we've already done a stakeholder mapping as part of our business case process, and we sit in the room and go, this is the project deliveries, this is what we are delivering, more importantly sometimes this is what we're not delivering. It's so easy to people go, oh, but could we just, and we can have sensible conversations about it, absolutely. But there has to be an understanding. If you want to add X, Y, and Z to your parameters of that project, A, it's going to cost more, B, it's going to take more resource, and it's going to take longer to deliver. And I'm a great believer of trying to break things down into elephant-sized burgers, if you will. So kind of going, what can we deliver in phases so that the business benefits sooner where it works, and then we layer on top of that and add the complexities and the levels of ability to it. So from my point of view, it's making sure that everybody's clear on the outset of what it is. We've just started using a new project tool, so we started using Monday.com. So we've got all the stakeholders to be on that as well, so that they can see how the project's developing, progressing. We definitely, like some other businesses, I'm sure, have comms. How do you effectively communicate with all your staff, particularly when some of them are clinicians and they're not necessarily checking their emails? Because why would they? They're seeing patients. Versus anything else. So we try and pull all of that together and think about how we communicate with people at the right time, at the right bit, so everyone's well informed, and therefore there's no surprises, because there's a conception that people don't like change, and I don't necessarily think it's true that people don't like change. People don't like surprises, and surprise change, and that's the bit that we're always trying to manage. When I joined, we've created 2 new roles called business readiness leads, and they're critical to a lot of our projects that involve that change management piece. So they'll go out and be kind of soft, supportive role that kind of adapts people ready for the change. They'll make sure that they've understood the as-is processes. They'll get people ready for what the to-be processes are, and the teams know that they're there and available after the project goes live as well. People don't just drop off the cliff, and then they go back 6 months, 12 months later to make sure that the project was realised in the way that we originally called out in the project kickoff. So that makes people feel more supported, and it makes people buy into what we're doing as a company.
So getting the right people, the right processes, obviously, like say, strong communication, engagement, stakeholder involvement from the offset, and the parameters of delivery. So yeah, it's quite a lot to juggle. But I know you touched on sort of technology, and we've mentioned AI in the past. Which, I mean, what's your thoughts on how AI technology, can influence a transformation journey? Not always positive, but what are your thoughts on technology and AI across the whole transformation health tech sort of piece at the moment?
Yeah, I think AI it's a super exciting space, right? And I've never been more excited to work in healthcare and technology than I am at this moment in time, because I do think we're on the cusp of something pretty awesome. Like, we've been looking at the ambient listening products that exist, that was traditionally your speech to text, but if some of the demos that we're seeing can be believed, that you'll be able to, as a clinician, just talk to a computer and it will be able to take it all and turn NOMED codes, prescriptions, referral letters, and do all of that. If we look at some of the stuff that Copilot is promising to bring in your Microsoft Stack products, it could completely revolutionise how we work. We know that the NHS is at a breaking point because it doesn't have enough staff, or it doesn't have the right staff, and it's struggling to run on a cost bed. It's how could you alleviate those mundane, boring tasks that people repeat time and time again? How can AI help unlock and do that for us? But the balance to all of that at the moment, and the big thing that keeps coming up in the conversations that we have whenever we're talking about AI, is how are we using it ethically? How are we being safe in its practice and its use? And that's not even just around the clinic, not being a clinically decision made tool. It might support clinicians in the way that we've seen with the mammograms, and the fact that you don't in certain areas they're trialing it, aren't they, where you don't need 2 radiographers, you just radiologists, sorry, and you just have one, and that AI is helping improve clinical variation rather than improving one way or another. It is things like that, but it's also around how are we making sure that our data and our information is not getting out into the big wide
Yeah.
world, that
Yeah.
commercially sensitive information isn't going that way, but also that people aren't taking for granted they could just throw something into chat GBT or bar
Mm.
or anything else and assume it to be 100% accurate
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
have any bias. It might help. We've talked about it for our bid teams. It might help your bid team get up to a level where they've not got to deal with a blank page, because that's
Mm.
scary when you're answering a bid question for anyone that's been in a bid team.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But not to assume that everything in it is factually correct, and not
Yeah.
to assume that it's going to be written in the style that you want it to be written in.
Mm.
So for me, it's a super exciting space, but it's got to make sure that it's got the right governance, as with everything in healthcare, the right governance surrounding it to be used in the right way.
Yeah, and I was reading, like, a sort of medical chat box ultimately isn't a trained clinician, like you said. So, it can give benefits in terms of automation, speed, and potentially accuracy, but and even 24/7 access in some of the chat boxes, and giving, analyzing symptoms, medical advice. But like you say, sometimes it's that there are lots of benefits to it, but those risks and parameters that sort of need managing as well.
Absolutely, and ultimately, it's like the chatbots, right? And AI can be really cool and use it, but sometimes we just want to speak to a human as well. I think
Mm.
particularly when it comes to our healthcare, we just want that reassurance that, is this on my wherever part of my body? Is that okay? Is that normal? And
Mm.
I'm not sure we're ever going to believe a robot over that, and that's controversial, right? Because you could argue that actually there might become a time where, at the same time, I'm probably going to believe an X-ray more than I'd believe somebody just looking at me as a person, and
Mm.
that's
Very
ultimately
true. Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
that is making that decision about me. So I don't know, but I do think I'm in a very cool space. I'm in a very cool role at the moment, and I think there's lots that's going to be coming down the line in the not too distant, that will help us leverage the way that people work, for in a very meaningful way. And I don't think that's
Mm.
happened for a long time.
No, absolutely. It's certainly exciting times. Just bring it back to feeding back to the sort of transformation projects. Would there be any sort of advice or anything that you'd like to sort of just really lay out to the listeners in conclusion of, managing transformation successfully, and your sort of transformation journey, Zara?
Yeah, I think transformation is, I've just said all the good stuff about it, right? At the same
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
it's really hard, and I definitely go through the change curve on quite a regular basis. Where it's like the stages of grief almost, of that
Yeah.
change curve. So there's times where I'm like I am with you now. I'm getting, it's super cool, it's great, this is brilliant, and we've got all this stuff that's going to do amazing things for the business. Um, and then obviously that can only last a certain, before you suddenly go, oh my gosh, we're never going to deliver this. It feels really hard. It feels really like the business is never going to understand what we're trying to deliver. That the people don't want the change. That understanding what's good, and
Mm.
then you get on that other side of the curve again, and then you go, yes, okay, it's clicked. Because for the business, it's really hard as well, right? Because there's definitely a point when you go live with whether it be a new system, a new product,
Mm.
and they will be naturally in their head doing the old process and the new
Mm.
process at the same time. So it feels like they've suddenly had their work doubled on them, and they're
Mm.
like, this isn't having any benefit or change, and they're going to take that to the project team, the transformation team, and going, this isn't working for us. And this is where you've got to steadfast and go, but believe us, it will get better. We need to be checking that everything we said we will do has been done,
Yeah. Yeah.
and riding that a little bit. So I think it's kind of, for me personally, I need to try and flatten my change curve out a bit and feel less that I'm on a roller coaster,
Yeah.
and more than on a, maybe like a little steam train with a few hills.
Doesn't sound as exciting, but yeah, it's a good analogy. Well, look, Zara, many thanks for your time, and great talking today. Yeah, very honest and open. So thanks for that. And just lastly, to the listeners, good to hear your views and opinions on the sort of things that we've discussed today in terms of, key to managing transformation within the healthcare sector. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ben. Really nice to have been chatting with you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed Talking Tech Journeys, and we'll catch you next time. Good company and colleagues in a career make the journey more rewarding. If you did enjoy, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favourite podcast platform. It really helps us reach more listeners like you. Don't forget to follow and join the Talking Tech Journeys, the podcast group on LinkedIn, where you can join in debate and message us directly if you'd like to be considered as a guest, have any questions, comments, or topic suggestions. You can also email ben.whiteley@bpmtech.co.uk. Until next time, enjoy your journey.